right, what's going on, guys? I am your host, Brett Morris, and I'm excited to be here for another episode of Recovery Revolution Live. As a reminder, I wanted to let you guys know that we are posting the audio only version of the live streams as a podcast. So if you can't watch the video, or if we have another social media blackout like last week, you can still get the audio version. Just search Recovery Revolution Live on your favorite podcast app. And I also have another podcast called Recovery Survey. This upcoming week on Wednesday, the new episode is going to be with my friend Sierra Carter, and she has overcome an eating disorder, and she talks about how she did that and how she tried different things like diets and different programs, and she just couldn't find success, and so she ended up going to college, and she got a degree in behavioral science to try to understand why she was behaving the way she was, and she's developed her own program to deal with that. So I think it could be a very beneficial episode for you guys. So if you're interested, please be sure to check out both podcasts on whichever your favorite podcast player is. And without any further ado, I'm going to bring on tonight's guest, Kyle Brewer. Welcome to the show, Kyle.
Thanks, Brett. It's good to be here, man. I'm excited to join you this evening.
Yeah, excited to have you on, man. We were talking a little bit before the live stream started, and I feel like you left me on like a cliffhanger there, and I'm ready to jump in and have you share your story, man.
Yeah, I had to like prime the pump a little bit and give you a couple little seeds so I could get you excited about what God's done in my life through recovery. And I'm just excited to share with you tonight. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here and to have a conversation with you. And I'm grateful for what you're doing, for what JR, who invited me on this, is doing for recovery across the country, and particularly through this platform that you have. And I'm just thankful to be here.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Glad to have you on. It's an absolute pleasure, and like I said, I can't wait to hear your story because I know it's going to be a good one. JR and I talked a little bit about you before we booked you on the show, and yeah, man, I'm ready to hear some more.
Yeah, well, I got to say that I met JR 3 weeks ago now at Mobilize Recovery. We were both at a conference in Las Vegas, and I got the opportunity the night before the conference starts. There was an awards banquet that we both attended, and they didn't sit you with people that you came with. They set you with completely random people, and so JR happened to be one of the people sitting at my table. And I was able to meet him, and we were able to just connect and network as we got ready to attend the conference. And then we had a great time the rest of the week at Mobilize Recovery. It was special. That I never would have in a million years thought I would go to Las Vegas, Nevada, and leave without putting a drink or a drug in my body. So that was just a miracle in and of itself. But man, I'm excited to share my story, and I don't know if you just want me to jump right in and kind of start from the beginning.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, well, thank you everyone who's listening now live and who will tune in and listen later. My name is Kyle Brewer. I'm 31 years old, and you may tell from the accent I am in Little Rock, Arkansas. This is where I was raised. I was born right across the bridge in Memphis, Tennessee, and so I grew up in a small town outside of Little Rock called Benton, Arkansas. Prior to landing in Benton, about the summer before I went into the fourth grade, my family and I, we traveled bounced around quite a bit. And the reason for that was that substance abuse, addiction, and everything that comes along with that, incarceration, the violence, and just the chaotic lifestyle was pretty common in my childhood. It was no big deal to watch, police arrest family members and to go visit family members in the penitentiary. That was just kind of a normal part of my childhood. Just about everyone other than my mom and my little sister, Kayla, has had their own battle with addiction. And even then, as we know, the family members, even though if they're not directly involved with themselves, they are certainly affected by it just as much as anyone else. So we've all kind of had our experiences with addiction. So it's really common in my family. And I like to say that I was just desensitized to substance abuse and just the lifestyle that comes along with that. Now, I will say my family did everything they could to provide for me. I never went without. I never was at a place where I had to want or need for anything. but just the environment that substance abuse and addiction and that lifestyle creates was what I was raised in. And my mom did her best to provide that role model for me. And if I would have followed that, then I would have, saved myself a lot of the things that I'll share I went through. I say that just to paint the picture. That's a little bit about my childhood. And up until the fourth grade, we had moved around Arkansas a lot, and then we landed in Benton. That's where my family decided to put roots down, and that's where I ended up growing up and going to high school and graduating from Benton. When I was about 11, 12, 13, it's somewhere in that age range, a couple really important things happened in my life. Because prior to this, I was, like any, typical child, I like to play sports. I like to be outside, ride my bike. I like to hang out with my friends. I even enjoyed going to school and, going to the Boys and Girls Club and, going to swimming, all these different things I like to participate in. And so even though I'd seen drug and alcohol abuse, I hadn't experimented with myself. Well, that was all going to change. And the events that kind of spurred that on were my grandmother passed away, and she was, just like my best friend. We did everything together, from going garage selling early in the morning to digging up worms to go fishing. And I just always loved staying the night with my grandma. She was just she was like a sense of peace to me. And I just loved her. She was really close, and I was really close with her. She passed away, and that was like my first loss to experience in life. That was my first real experience with death, particularly death of a family member. And I was mad. I got really angry and upset. Well, right before my grandmother passed away, about six months prior to this, she had encouraged me to go to church. And she had helped me get involved at a local church in Benton called Spring Creek Baptist Church. And I remember going, and I did their Awana, their youth program. And I remember I really enjoyed it. I liked what the church had to offer. And I really looked up to a particular pastor there, a youth pastor. And he actually ended up getting another job offer right about the same time that my grandmother passed away. So my grandma passed away, and this role model in my life that was at the church got another job at another church. And those two things were what, really frustrated me. It really made me angry. I remember being in my parents' front yard, yelling at the sky, throwing rocks at the sky, just mad at God, asking him why he took my grandma and why he was doing this. Well, that was kind of what led to me walking away from, being involved in the church. I was there for about 6 months, and then I walked away from it, and I was mad. And I knew I'd watched family members all my life change the way that they felt. And so I knew that drinking alcohol would do that. And so it was shortly after that where I experimented with alcohol for the first time. And, I remember liking it. I do remember being terribly hungover and sick the next morning. But what I do also remember about it is that it changed the way that I was currently feeling. And I liked the ability to do that. And I liked the way that it made me feel. And so it wasn't, overnight thing that I was drinking every day, but it planted that seed that, hey, I can do this. It'll change the way I feel. And so, I started drinking alcohol occasionally. Like I said, I was 11, 12, 13. So it wasn't nothing serious. It was a couple of years after that. I was 15. I started smoking marijuana. And marijuana was the first one that became a daily part of my life. It was from the moment that I smoked it. I remember I was intoxicated, and I'd always say, I'll never smoke weed. I just drink. I'll never smoke weed. And this is kind of a common statement that I make throughout my life. And while I was intoxicated, poor judgment, smoked weed at a party. And then I woke up the next day and I was like, well, I tried it when I was intoxicated and I don't really know what it was like. So now I got to try it again. So I really know what it's like. And so that kind of set me on the journey of starting to smoke weed every day. And it wasn't too long after that I got arrested for the first time. At the age of 16, I got a possession of marijuana charge. I was down with some friends, some older guys that I was hanging out with, and we were getting high and swimming and got arrested. And so in my small town, Benton, everybody kind of knows what's going on and who's doing what, and who's the bad kids in school, who's the popular kids, who's the who family members and parents who you not want your kids hanging around with, and all these types of things. And when I caught that charge, I started that reputation for myself. And that word spread pretty quickly. And so I got put on probation. I'm still trying to maintain, still playing sports, trying to play basketball. I decided that I left the other sports behind. I just want to play basketball. And so I was still trying to do that at this particular point in time, but I got that reputation. I got on probation, and I was in the system. And I remember I tried for that first 6 months of probation to continue to get high and successfully use on probation. And right at the end, I got a drug screen, failed the drug screen. So now I'm back on probation for another 6 months. And now I've really got that reputation in town that I'm the pothead. I'm the kid that likes to get in trouble. I'm the kid that gets high. I'm the kid that you don't want your kids hanging out with. And, instead of taking that and doing something different with it and trying to change that perspective about me, I embraced it, and it became my identity, and I liked it, and I enjoyed that, and I was not ashamed of that. So it became a part of who I was, and I took pride in that. And so I did realize that I wasn't going to be able to keep getting high on probation. So I went back to alcohol. I started drinking every day my junior year of high school, and I caught my third charge. So I got the possession charge. I had failed a drug screen. So I went to jail a couple of times. But the third thing that happened was I was stealing money from my employer to support my alcohol use. And they found out about it. So now I get a theft of property charge. I'm 17 years old. This is the third time going in front of the juvenile judge, and he was not happy about that. He was going to send me to C-STEP, which is like a boot camp for teenagers. But the thing was that I had continued to go to school. So I had not neglected my schooling. I was not skipping school all the time. I tried to maintain decent grades. And so my parents advocated for me to go to rehab for the first time. They were like, he's had everything, has been directly associated with the substance abuse. We know that's the problem. If we can get him help, it will keep him from failing his senior year of high school. And that's like the only thing he has going on. So he agreed to let me go to rehab. And that was my first time going to treatment. I went to a place in Fort Smith, Arkansas for 75 days. And I came back. I'd missed the first 4 weeks of my senior year, but I was allowed to do schoolwork while I was there. So that was my first introduction to recovery. I wasn't at all ready for that. I wasn't at all convinced that I actually had a problem with drugs or alcohol, but I was exposed to some good information. And so when I came back from that program, I started hanging out with a different group of friends. And this group of friends were more, they drank, but they weren't getting high. And they were more interested in kind of the future and going to college and trying to figure out what the next step after high school was. And so that had me, because that's the people I was around. I was thinking the same way. And so I'd stopped getting high. I was drinking still, but I was more focused on like what I'm going to do after high school. And it was at this particular point in time that I found something out that's probably going to surprise you just as much as it surprised me. My family had they discovered that I'm a quarter Native American. I'm out of the Oneida Nation reservation in Wisconsin, and my grandmother was a full-blooded Native American. So that opened up a lot of benefits for higher education. And so it unlocked the door for me to go to school and get it paid for through scholarships and the various benefits that the reservation provided. And so I started looking into the school I was going to go to, and I ended up deciding with my friend group that we were going to go to a place called the University of Central Arkansas, which was about 45 minutes from my hometown in Conway. And we all went to UCA, and we made that decision as a group and went up there together. So I got to paint this picture real quick before I transition, and then I want to pause for a minute and make sure you don't want me to answer any questions. But I had been on probation from the time I was 16 to the time I was 18. I had my license suspended after that third strike. So I hadn't driven, I hadn't been able to drive my truck for about 6 months at this particular point in time. And I was, obviously living with my parents, but I graduated high school. I turned 18. The reservation gives you a check for $3,000 when you turned 18, which is a blessing. But I'm trying to paint this picture. I turned 18. They let me off probation, not because I'd, completed and done right, but because I'd turned 18 and they couldn't keep me on juvenile probation any longer. So they let me off probation. I get my license back and I'm given $3,000. And now I'm getting ready to go off to college as a freshman in college in a new town, and kind of the reins taken off of me. And so that's when I'll stop there before I move any further and just check in with you, Brett. Make sure you're not wanting me to say anything or answer any questions.
Yeah, man. I'm in the story, man. I'm just sitting here like ready to hear more, but I can totally relate to parts of the story that you've already shared, man. Like parts of your journey are similar to mine. I can remember being on probation and still trying to use, and like that whole uh almost like the thrill of trying to get away with it and continue my use. And it's a very relatable story, man. I feel like there's a lot of parallels between your story and my story.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that I've learned in recovery is that because for so long I compared myself to this person, that person, my story. I'm different, all these different things. And man, recovery, it's like our story is all like you could change up some details, some places, some people, but like the narrative and kind of the way things go, it's pretty similar in almost all situations.
Yeah, definitely. I'm scanning the comments and I don't see any questions that have come in yet, but I'm sure we'll get some here in a little bit. And I was also going to announce before that towards the end of the video, we're going to do another giveaway. So don't go anywhere, guys. We're going to be giving away another copy of Victoria's Voice here later on in the live stream. So stick around for that. And I'll turn it back over to you.
All right, and that book is a good one. I got to learn about that story at the conference, so that's exciting that you are giving that away. I see my mom and dad are in the comments saying I love you. I just want to say that I love them too, and I'm grateful for them. But so now I've graduated high school. I've got the money, $3,000, and I basically tell my family like I don't need you anymore. I'm going to go back to drinking and getting high. And so that's what I did for the summer up until I used all that money and had to go back to my family's house and say, hey, I need your help going off to college. And so I go off to school, and I'm in Conway, 45 minutes from my hometown, freshman in college, released from probation, no, stipulations on me, nothing keeping me from just going full blast. I'm in a new town and it's freshman. It's in college. And so like I've already mentioned, I love to have fun, love to party. That was my identity. That's who I was. But something really important happened here. And this is where my story kind of takes another turn. Is my freshman year of college, I got my wisdom teeth removed. And it was during this point in time that they gave me a prescription of oxycodone. And so I had prescription pain pills, not my own, but in high school, athletes get hurt. They might pass them out in class or whatever. But I had never really had my own prescription and any substantial access to opioids up until this point in time. So this is my first real exposure to opiates was after my wisdom teeth removal. And so it's the first couple of weeks of college. I just had a wisdom tooth removal surgery. I got this prescription. And I remember taking them, and I love the way that these pills made me feel. I know I talked to some people and they're like, well, those types of medications make me nauseous. They make me sick, make me sleepy. I don't like them. For me, they gave me energy. They like had me go, go, go. And then when I mixed them with alcohol, it even intensified it even more. And like I said, that perfect storm that I was just talking about, I'm off. I'm in college on my own, doing my own thing. And now I've got this prescription. It was just really a perfect storm for me to be in a bad situation. But I was able to call for at least two more prescriptions on this prescription of oxycodone and say like, hey, I have dry socket. My teeth are still hurting. And they would call me in the script to the pharmacy. This was back in 2008. I graduated high school in 2008 and was a freshman in 2008. And so the prescribing stuff and the monitoring of everything wasn't as strict back then. So they called me in a prescription, and so I had these prescriptions for 3 different refills. And by the end of that, I was hooked. Anytime I could find these pills, I would take them. I would buy them. I would spend my money on them because I love the way they made me feel. But honestly, I also like the idea that I could take these medications every day basically all day long. And for the most part, nobody would know that I was taking them. They'd have no idea, because it wasn't like alcohol. I could drink alcohol, but after a certain point, then everybody knew I was drunk. It wasn't like marijuana. I could smoke a certain amount of weed, but the smell and the eyes, I'd always have to hide stuff. Like, I could take these pills and people wouldn't know about it, but I could feel great, and I could have the euphoria, and I could have the energy, and just be the people person and have the fun that I like to have. And so from that point forward, freshman year of college, anytime I could find an opiate, I would buy it and I would use them. But I would also, abusing alcohol, marijuana, a variety of other drugs during this particular point in time. But opiates became the main thing, the priority, the main drug of choice. But I loved college. So this is going on, but I'm also I'm in school, my freshman year of college, and I love campus. I love just going to class. I love the parties, obviously, but I just love the whole vibe, the scene of what college had to offer. And I just kind of fell in love with that environment. And I had this ability, kind of like in high school, to continue to go to school, to go to class, and to do really good academically. So my freshman year of college, the first semester was a little rough as I was adjusting, but after that, I started making really good grades, and I started making, 4.0s and getting put on the dean's list and getting put on the president's list, and, letters are getting sent home, and I'm getting really involved on campus and finding, my friend group, and getting involved in community, and, learning about Greek life and fraternities and sororities and, everything that college has to offer. And so it really looked like at that point in time that I was doing really well, actually, that, on the outside, that for, a guy that was 18 to 22 years old, I was doing everything you'd expected this person to do, and I was doing it at a high level. But underneath that, underneath the story, underneath the surface, because I had this ability, and I carried this around for a long time, that I could convince you. If I could convince you that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, and that I'm doing good, that I'm going to make you happy, I'm going to please you, but then I can also lie to myself and maintain my denial, so I can also continue to do the things that I want to do. And that was kind of the mentality that I had. So if I could put on this image, put on this face that everything's okay and everything's all right, and I'm doing really good, that anything that I was doing behind closed doors would stay behind closed doors, and nobody had to know about it, including myself. I would never have to acknowledge it and take responsibility for it. And so that was exactly how I went through college. Like I said, I was making good grades. The reason the ability to support this habit came from my scholarship funds. The incredible blessing that having those benefits they also became the thing that enabled me to continue using at the rate that I was using, because prescription opiates are not cheap, and but I had the finances. So I wasn't experiencing that struggle to, maintain that addiction, because money at that point in time wasn't really an issue, because I would get anywhere from, $6,000 to $9,000 a semester of excess aid after they paid for my tuition and my housing. So I had, unlimited access to these funds, no responsibility other than going to school and partying and having fun. And 2 years into college, I was doing great, still doing great. I joined a fraternity. I ended up, excelling in that area. I became one of the vice presidents of the fraternity and became the president of the All Greek Council, serving in these different, councils and communities on campus, and just, really doing well. I would say, and I got to go on all the trips, all what a college experience, anything I thought it would ever be, I got to do it. I went on the snowboard and ski trips, the beach trips, the cruises. I had the friends and the girls and the money and just the parties and just anything that I could have ever wanted as a 18 to 22-year-old guy I had. And it was at the tip of my fingertips. But again, underneath that, not too many knew the real story that was being written, because it was a real dark story. Because after a couple years now, instead of taking hydrocodone or oxycodone, now I've discovered roxycodone, and now instead of taking them, I'm snorting these pills. And instead of them costing $5 or $10 a pill, they're costing $30 to $40 a pill, and it's progressing, rapidly progressing, and I'm lying to myself, and I'm in denial, and the the ability to do all these things on the surface looking good is actually feeding my ability to continue to abuse drugs. And so I continued through college that way. And it didn't really start coming to the surface till about my senior year. My senior year, my family realized that there was something going on because, like I said, I get $6,000, $9,000 a semester, and then 2 months in, I'm broke, asking them to pay my rent at the fraternity house. My mom realized that something was going on that was a little bit more than just smoking weed or drinking alcohol, because they knew I was doing that. I got a public intox. I still got arrested in college a couple times, but they didn't know that I had progressed to, doing pills the way that I was doing them. And so my mom was just like, I think she believed that if I would just graduate from college, get that degree, that I would grow up, I would get a job, I would, start a family, I would just kind of move on from that season and stage of life. And so she enabled me. She essentially enabled me. They would pay my rent. They would, sneak me money and, help me get through that senior year of college. And so I limped my way through that senior year. And I remember it was May 5th of 2013, the day that I graduated from college. I'm the first person ever in my family to graduate from, traditional four-year university. And I remember waking up that day and, I say that being the first person in my family, you would think that day would be a day of celebration. That would be a day of just honoring the hard work that I put in and my family just being proud. But that's not particularly what I remember about the day that I graduated from college. What I remember is waking up that day, and what I'd done the night before is what I'd always done is I bought a certain amount of pills, and I'd, create a plan in my head about how I was only going to use this amount. And then I was going to save this amount for in the morning. But every time, I'd always use more than I wanted to or planned to. And then I woke up in the morning, I didn't have anything. And so I was at the very early onset of withdrawal, because at this point, it was no longer about the euphoria or the energy or the fun that I had from taking these pills. It was about, like, if I don't take these pills, I'm physically sick and I cannot do day-to-day task and function in life. So I had to have these medications to just do regular activities, but especially do something like go graduate from college and entertain my family and, celebrate and all these things. So I'm panicked when I wake up and I realize I don't have any pills, and I'm early on in the withdrawal process. I'm starting to have cold sweats and, I'm hot and I'm freezing cold and all those things. And so I'm on the phone going in panic mode, trying to find, some pills. And I finally find, a couple of hydros that give me enough strength to walk across the stage and pick up a degree, because I knew that if I couldn't find those, then I was not going to be able to put on that mask and put on that face that I've been putting on for the last 5 years that says, hey, Kyle's good, Kyle's great, Kyle's doing exactly what he's supposed to be doing, and he's doing it well, and he's, be proud of him and be happy for him and approve of him. And so I needed these medications, and so I found a few pills. I walked across the stage and I got a degree. What I hadn't shared up to this point is what I was studying for in college. And this will just paint a picture about the denial, the insanity, the mentality that I was living in, because the degree I picked up that day was a Bachelor of Science in addiction studies. And so I had spent the last 5 years of my life studying the disease of addiction. The scientific research, the data about drugs, everything that you can think of when it surrounds the disease of addiction. That's what I had been studying. So I'd seen it destroy my family firsthand growing up. I'd seen the effects. Like I said, I grew up around it. I saw it destroy family members. I'd experienced many consequences myself already up until college. And I was studying now, literally in the classroom, getting an education, getting a college degree on addiction. And I believe that this information, these outcomes, these things that I'd seen and learned did not apply to me. And that somehow, some way I was going to be able to stop using, stop drinking one day and just move on from it. And that would be the end of it. And that I say that just to say that I was in complete denial. I was full of pride. I was arrogant. I was entitled. And I didn't think that. I thought I was the perfect exception, the ultimate exception to all the rules, and that none of this was going to affect me. I had this idea in my head about what someone that, had a problem looked like, and it wasn't me. It wasn't the person that was doing really good in school that had all the friends and the money and the family and going on trips and all these, like that wasn't it. And so because that wasn't my reality, I just convinced myself that I didn't have a problem. Well, you remember I told you that my mom thought if I got that piece of paper, that degree, that I would move on and everything would be okay. Well, that's not how it happened. That's not, I wish that there was a certain amount of education or money or religion that could give someone the exempt card from suffering from the disease of addiction, and that would exempt them and their family. But that's just not how the disease of addiction works. The disease of addiction does not discriminate against anyone based off of their socioeconomic status, their religious views, their background, where they came from, where they grew up, who their family is. None of that matters. And so I got that education, and I was still left with the problem that I had, that now I'd, taking up to $100, $150 a day worth of opiates to just maintain and get through. So I graduated. What graduation did do, though, is now I don't have the scholarships. Now I don't have the fraternity in the friend group and the social networks. Now I don't have the education that I'm using to make my life look good. I don't have these things anymore. And so from 2013 to 2017, things spiraled, and they spiraled really bad and really fast. I tried to continue to stay in Conway where I was at for another year, and maintain the life that I was living, and try to figure out ways to continue using at the rate that I was using. And it just didn't work. I didn't have the same financial means. Most of my friends had moved off and got jobs and kind of went on with their life. And, I just realized that I had created something that I don't know how to maintain any longer, because it was impossible to maintain. And so I stayed up there for another year before I eventually moved back home. I moved back home to Benton. My family let me come home. And at this point, I'm not using my degree, obviously, because it's hard to use an addiction studies degree when you're in full blown active addiction and you're failing to admit that you have a problem and get help for it. It's just not possible. And so I was working, little odd end jobs, working at a gas station, working at a fireworks stand, working at whatever I could work at just to make enough cash to, when I got my check or when I got paid at the end of the day, I could go buy what I needed that could support me for the rest of that night and through the rest of the next day. Then I could start the whole cycle all over again. And so just, living basically from day to day, moment to moment. No, not future oriented in any sense of the word. I was just trying to maintain, trying to not be sick, and just trying to maintain this lifestyle that I had. And, like I said earlier, it was impossible. And I'm drinking during this time, alcohol, marijuana, smoking cigarettes, all those things were always a constant in my life. Just opiates was my primary concern at all times, but I was always doing those other things. And one night I was drinking pretty heavily, mixing with pills, and I was driving, which I did way too often. And I got a DWI. And so that ended up starting me on this 2-year journey of getting arrested multiple times for the same DWI, because, you get a huge fine. And if you're, in active addiction using, if you're like me, I could not pay a payment plan. I would set one up, make the first payment, and then by the second month, I would get a warrant put out for a failure to pay. So I ended up going to jail 3 times on that DWI because I couldn't pay my fines. I finally had to set the 30 days in jail to set that fine out. They allow us to do that, and where I'm from, that you can sit there and pay off a fine for a certain amount of days. And I remember being in this jail in this particular point in time, and my mom, messaging me on the kiosk, begging me to get help. She was using my grandmother's death and just kind of like, do it for your grandma. She was trying to do anything she could to convince me to get help, because she had realized that she had a role in this. And prior to this time, she had learned about Al-Anon, because up until then, she had enabled me. Like I said, in my senior year, she enabled me. She enabled me for a couple more years after that. Well, somewhere along the way, my mom started realizing how that enabling was actually hurting me. And she went and found a group called Al-Anon, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's a support group for friends and family members of people that are struggling in addiction. And she learned her role in that, and she learned how to make some really tough decisions. And she cut me off. My family never gave up on me, but they definitely let go of me for a point in time, and for a couple of years. And I'm so thankful for that today. But I'll tell you this, if you're a family member that's listening to this and you have a family member struggling, you may be going through this. Like, I hated my mom when she did this, and I called her every name in the book. I said some things that you should never say to another human, much less your mom. But I did, and for a couple of reasons, because I knew how to manipulate her. I knew how to pull on her heartstrings. I knew how to make her feel like what I was doing was her fault, and how that if she doesn't give me money, then it's going to ultimately be the end, and I'm going to take my own life. All the threats that I would make, the things that I would say. It was hard for her. I can only imagine, but I know today that if she would not have made those hard decisions to cut me off and essentially let me go, that I would not be alive today. And so I'm so grateful for my mom and my family taking those steps and making those hard decisions to stop enabling me to continue doing what I was doing and start allowing me to hit that bottom, and that bottom to feel exactly what that bottom should feel like. And like I said, that didn't happen overnight, but I'm in the jail cell talking to my mom. This is after that she had made those decisions. She's begging me, because she wouldn't want to talk to me unless I was wanting to go to treatment. And I wasn't trying to hear nothing about treatment because, like I said, I didn't have a problem, because I didn't look like this person or that person, or my life, all these things were happening. And she was begging me to go to treatment. I'm in there saying, like, I was telling her, I remember my rationale was that I'm not sick right now. Like, I don't have a problem because I'm not physically sick. Because I thought somehow, because I wasn't just in extreme withdrawal in the jail, that if that wasn't happening, then I don't have a problem. Well, in reality, there was just nothing you could say. If you said one thing, then I would argue a counterpoint to prove that I didn't have a problem. And so I was like, no, I'm not going to treatment. I remember getting released from jail for the third time on a DWI charge, walking across the street because I had no friends or family that were there to pick me up, using the phone from the gas station, calling a friend, having him pick me up. And within minutes of being released, we're getting high. We're on the way to Colorado for a weekend of getting high and drinking. And it never once in my mind, like, it never crossed my mind that, hey, you might have a problem. Like, literally, you just got out of jail for this very thing that's been following you for 2 years. And the first thing that you do is go right back to doing it. But it never occurred to me that, hey, I was not making the connection that the things that are happening in your life right now are directly connected to your drug and alcohol use. I would connect it all. I would connect it to not having a job. I would connect it to not having enough money. I would connect it to not having a vehicle. I would connect it to my family not doing this or doing that. But I was not making the connection that, hey, these problems, these issues, these things that are happening, these circumstances are actually directly tied to the things that I was doing that surrounded using drugs and alcohol. And it wasn't until I made that connection that anything could really happen. And so it was shortly after that jail stint that I had found myself really homeless for the first time in my life. It was in 2016. And I was in a park, and I remember, like, really it dawned on me that I didn't have anywhere to go. And so my family had told me, like, hey, if you're not allowed on our property, because I'd burned them and stole from them and done so many terrible things at this point. They were like, you're not allowed on our property. If you come to our property, you're not allowed anywhere past the garage. And the only reason you're allowed in the garage is if we're getting on the phone and we're going to treatment today, not tomorrow, not we're bargaining and I'm going to stay the night and we'll figure it out tomorrow. No, like, you're going to treatment today. We're making a plan. That's the only deal. And so I remember that was where I stood with them. And so, but I was homeless, and I was like, all right. So I had someone drop me off my family's house. Sure enough, I didn't get past the garage. My dad was there. Mom was there. We sat down, got in the phone book, found a 30-day treatment center that I went to the next day, and I completed that 30-day program. And I learned in that program that I had a drug problem, that I struggled with heroin and opiates, because after this point, I had graduated from the prescription pain pills to taking heroin and shooting heroin, snorting heroin, because I had said I'd never do that. And that was one of the things that I would never cross. I'd never shoot up. I'd never do heroin. But my dealer, he had started selling heroin to set up pills, and I was sick one day and he offered it to me for free. And so then, I didn't use anything else after that. And, but I learned in this 30-day treatment program that I had a problem with drugs, and I finished the program, and I got out and I stopped getting high. But what I didn't come to understand this, and I failed to admit to myself, is that I also had a problem with alcohol. And that for me, alcohol and drugs, there's no difference. That I am an alcoholic just as much as I struggle with addiction. just as much as anything else. So I had to learn that lesson. So for about 8 months, my life did improve. I actually started working in the recovery field because I thought, man, hey, now God's plan for my life makes sense. I got the degree. Now I went to rehab. I stopped getting high. I'm going to go be a counselor. And I just jumped right into it, lied about my sobriety date, which should have been my first red flag that this is not God's plan for my life. But, I was in that insanity. I convinced myself that what I was doing was right. And I'm drinking on the weekends. And I learned this in this season of my life that, like I said, I'm an alcoholic, but also I turn into a different person when I drink alcohol. I listen to different music. I hang out with different people. I talk differently. I treat people differently. I make a lot worse decisions. And all those things kind of came to a head one night. I went back up to Conway, to where I went to school at, and I was hanging around some old friends for homecoming, and I'm drinking all day. And what I also learned about alcohol is when I'm drinking, I'm more likely to be in environments where drug use is happening or people that use drugs are going to be. And so I found myself in one of those environments that night. And by the end of the night, I was smoking weed. It wasn't something crazy, but I was taking a bong hit. And it wasn't 2 weeks after that I was back to taking pills. It was just like bam, bam. And I lost my job. February 22nd is my birthday. So this was February 22nd, 2017. The job I was working in the recovery field at that time as a counselor in training. They asked me to step down. They had found out that I had returned to use, and they asked me to step down to go get help and I could come back and get my job back. And instead of doing that, because what that would have required me to do was to go home to my parents and to admit that I was wrong for drinking, because they had been telling me, like, look, this is not a good idea. I don't know what you're doing. Why are you doing this? And I would lie to them. I would justify it, I would rationalize it. And so instead of having to do that, I just said, forget it. I'm just going back full blown. So I just jumped right back in to active addiction like I'd never left. And the car that I had that I'd gotten over the last 8 months, I totaled it in a wreck because I was driving down the interstate. I'd been doing Xanax and heroin throughout the day, and I nodded off at the wheel. And I hit one of the concrete barriers on the side of the interstate, and that, woke me up. And, instead of like waking up and thanking God that, hey, I'm alive, I woke up and tried to figure out how I could lie and report this to the insurance company. And so I had that car, and I got it, basically towed to an apartment complex. And I lived out of that car for about 2 months until the company that I was leasing it from came and repossessed it. Because I'd owed like $300 after the insurance company covered it. And so they came and repossessed it. And now I didn't have the vehicle that I was living out of. And so I'm homeless again. And I'm back to, shooting up heroin. I've now introduced methamphetamines into the equation because I learned that if I use a little meth when I'm going through withdrawal, it kind of helps a little bit. And so it's all kind of led up to July 10th of 2017. July 10th of 2017 is my sobriety date. It's the day that the journey that I'm on today began. And it's the day that I would have never thought that would be the day that led me to where I'm at today. But this is where I'm at, July 10th of 2017. I'm in Benton, my hometown. I'm in a hotel, and I'd been there for about 7 days. And the reason I was in a hotel is because I would, use people, particularly like women that I would, get close to. I would try to find a way to manipulate them and use them. And I was particularly manipulating this one person. They were paying for me a hotel room. And that's the only reason I had a roof over my head. But what I've been doing was I was in this hotel, and I'd not had enough money to buy opiates or heroin. So I was using meth because I was trying to curb the withdrawal symptoms, basically trying to detox myself off of heroin by using meth. Well, I wasn't a huge meth user, so I had not really done it this way, and for several days in a row. So I'd been up, no sleep, not eating, in isolation by myself. And at the end of that, I was in a drug-induced psychosis. I thought that police were after me. I thought my family was there trying to get me from the hotel. My reality was so distorted, and my reality was just skewed. And I thought that all these things were happening that weren't happening. And that led to me calling my family, calling people, freaking out. And my mom and my family are they're hysterical because this is just another day in the woods. But, I'm talking crazy. But my uncle, so I mentioned earlier that I used to walk, go visit family members in the penitentiary. One of my uncles had got released, and he had got connected to a Celebrate Recovery, a Christ-centered 12-step program at a local church. And he was doing well, and he was in recovery, and he was thriving. and he had a lot of connections to the recovery community. And he saw this phone call that I was making as an opportunity. Not that I was calling asking for help, but it was an opportunity to come pick me up without me really knowing what was going on and drop me off somewhere. And so that's what he did. He came and picked me up, and he took me to a local homeless shelter called the Nehemiah House. And the Nehemiah House is a homeless shelter, and they also have a recovery program. But at that point in time, I got dropped off at the homeless shelter. And he told me, I was on the way there, I was kind of explaining to him what was going on in my mind and what was going on. And he said, look, he's like, I'm going to drop you off here. You're going to go inside. You're going to close your eyes. You're going to go to sleep. And you're not going to tell anybody any of the things that you're telling me. And if you've ever been in a drug-induced psychosis, particularly with meth, that is not how the story goes. So I went into this homeless shelter. I freaked out all night until the staff came in. And they very calmly set me down and said, hey, look, we're going to call you an ambulance, and we're going to get you the help that you need. So they called an ambulance. Ambulance picked me up, took me to a local hospital where I acted a fool. I had to get tackled and sedated with Halidol and strapped to the wheelchair and all these things because I was just my reality. Everything I was doing was driven by fear because I thought a lot of things were happening that weren't happening. But long story short, that got me to detox. I went upstairs to detox, and they had told me when I left the Nehemiah House, like, hey, if you go over here and you do what you need to do in detox and you come back, we can talk about and offer you a spot in our recovery program. And so I was in detox. My family came to visit me. I didn't have anywhere to go. The kind of the rules were set like, hey, the only way anybody's picking you up from the hospital is if you're going straight back to the Nehemiah House. And that's the only option. Or you're on the street, you're on your own. And so I didn't necessarily want help. I didn't necessarily want to change what I was doing. I was just not wanting to be homeless. So I say that just to say that, man, God can do a whole lot with just a little bit. And so when I got discharged, my uncle picked me up. He took me back to the Nehemiah House, and I entered into their 9-month faith-based recovery program. So the Nehemiah House is a faith-based program, Christ-centered. And I entered the program, and I hated it. I didn't want to be there. For about 6 weeks, I really struggled. I wanted to leave any chance that I got. I tried to call and get people to pick me up and convince them that, hey, this is a good idea, or I'm going to do something different. And just nothing worked out. Everything fell through. Any little thought that I had to leave, God would intervene and put someone in my life that would keep me there for a little bit longer. And after about 6 weeks, a couple things happened that changed my life forever. The most important decision that I've ever made is that I gave my life to Jesus Christ. And what that meant for me was not just saying that, hey, he's going to save me from my sin, he's going to save me from hell, but I'm going to also make him the Lord of my life. And I'm going to try to take these principles and these ideas that I'm being taught in this program, and I'm going to try to apply them in my life, and I'm going to try to listen to them and obey them to the best of my ability. So I said, look, I'm going to give my heart, my life to Jesus. He's going to be my Savior. He's going to be my Lord. And I made that decision. And the second decision I made right behind it was that I made a deal with God. So now that I give you my life, I'm going to make a deal with you. I'm going to give you 9 months. And in 9 months, I'm going to believe that you're going to use this program, the Nehemiah House, to change my life. In worst case scenario, at the end of 9 months, my life is going to be at least a little bit better than it is right now. Because, life was not looking good at that particular moment. So I figured, hey, I want to make a deal with God, give him 9 months, and let's see what happens. And so those two decisions, kind of really set the trajectory of where I'm at today. Nothing happened overnight. It wasn't like I made those decisions and it was like, man, everything's different. Everything changed. Everything's better. Everything's good. No, but those are the decisions that built the foundation of everything that started happening after that. What it did, it was open my heart, opened my mind, and I surrendered. Once I surrendered, it's not like there weren't hard days, but man, it got a little bit easier. Once I gave in to the idea that I needed to leave, or I wasn't supposed to be there, or long-term treatment was not for me, or a relationship with God was not for me, or a life of recovery was not for me. When I surrendered, it really changed things, and I started learning. I started growing in recovery. They walked us through the 12 steps of recovery in this program. They walked us through a variety of different biblical studies, a lot of different curriculums, and they poured into and invested in us. Literally hundreds of volunteers, pastors, ministers, friends, community leaders, partners, everybody that came into this program, just poured their heart and soul into us, to the people that are in this program. And the staff there, how the directors of the Nehemiah House, the two men, had both previously went through the program themselves. And I remember it having such a profound impact on me that these two men that were living differently today had such a similar story to me. Like I was talking to Brett earlier, that our stories have different details, different places, different people, but the stories are pretty much the same. And I remember finding so much hope in the fact that these guys are sitting in front of me telling me a very similar story, but today I look at them and I'm watching them live a life that doesn't consist of getting high. It doesn't consist of drinking. It doesn't consist of all the chaos that comes along with a life of addiction. They have families. They have a wife. They have a kid. They're active in their community. They seem to be happy. They seem to have purpose. They have joy. And it gave me this hope that, like, this can happen for me. Like, this is possible for me. And before that, a life that didn't consist of either actively getting high every day or drinking was just a fairy tale. I mean, I wasn't really interested in that being a reality, but I really couldn't imagine it being so, because when I started drinking at the age of 11 or 12, like from that point forward, like I was always either getting high or drinking. And every activity in life, whether it was the lowest moments of my life or the highest moments when I was doing a lot of fun things, it all was centered around that one thing. And that was always my priority. And that was always my agenda. So comprehending that there could be a life without that was really hard for me, almost impossible. But when I was seeing other people that had been where I'd been, that were living a different way, I got so much hope. And so they really mentored me. They really led me both in my faith journey with God and also my recovery journey. And I just remember coming alive. I mean, the Bible talks about becoming a new creation. It talks about people being raised from the dead. And man, I wasn't literally physically dead. I should have been on many occasions, but I was spiritually dead. I was emotionally dead. I was just beat down. I was broken. I was hopeless. But throughout this 9-month program, each day I was growing. Each day my eyes were being opened to something new. My heart was being filled with joy, with purpose, with love. And I was just becoming a brand new person. And I learned something, that it was not about the Nehemiah House or a 12-step fellowship or a particular amount of time or a particular program. Like, recovery is a lifestyle. And being a Christian is a lifestyle. And so there's no like start and finish line. Like, what I was learning in this program was what to do for the rest of my life. What I was learning in this program was that I have to build my foundation. I have to build my life on something that is solid, a rock solid foundation. And for me, what that rock solid foundation is a relationship with Christ and the Word of God and the principles of recovery. That's my foundation that I build my life upon today. And they taught me that there, and they taught me how to do that, and they role modeled it to me. They also taught me the value of being involved in the local church. They taught me the value in serving others before myself. And they taught me the value of just giving back in general. And so I was implementing those things. I was growing every day. Obviously, I had challenges, and some days were harder than others, and I didn't want to be there. But I fell back on those two decisions. A, God, I'm giving my life to you. And B, you're going to use this program to change my life. And so I continued to stay committed to that. And I graduated that program in April 2018. And I didn't really have a solid, clear plan as far as the next step, the transition. The only option that was available to me was go home to my family. And my family, they have a nice home. They have nice things. They have, all the comforts in the world that were much more comfortable than the homeless shelter I was living in. But I learned this about 4 months in. God had really showed me that, hey, you're not supposed to live at your parents' house right now. That's not where you're supposed to be. That's not a place you're going to thrive. That's not a place you're going to grow. That's not a place that you're going to become the man that I've called you to be. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going home. That's not where I'm going to go. Not because I wasn't thankful for it. Not because my family's not great today. Because my dad, everybody has found a path to recovery. Everybody has started living a different life today. So for the most part, we have healthy relationships and good boundaries and all these different things. So it would have been a great place for me to go. But I knew that was not where I was supposed to be. And so I decided that, well, there's not somewhere to go, that I'm going to stay. And so I went into their work program. The Nehemiah House offers a work program that you could go into. And so I went to there. I started interning at the Nehemiah House, working with the leadership there, just serving the ministry, giving back, continuing to do the things that I learned to do for the 9 months, going to church every week, going to my recovery meetings, staying involved in the community, serving, giving back, all these various life principles that I'd learned. I just continued to do those. And after about 3 months of being in the work program, which puts me at being at the Nehemiah House for a year, I got an opportunity to pursue some ministry schooling and some seminary education. And so I left the Nehemiah House and I went to a local church, and I started working for this church and going and attending their school program. And it was just such a blessing, such a awesome opportunity to learn about ministry underneath an incredible leadership team of First Assembly in North Little Rock. They poured in and invested in my life and really showed me just the hands and feet of Jesus and the character of God in a real tangible way. They did that in a lot of ways, but one story that really kind of highlights this is so for 2 years I didn't have a vehicle. I was working there, or I was just going to school there, and I was staying on site at the church. They had some apartments for the students, and I was going to school, and I didn't have a job, and I didn't have a vehicle. So if there were two things that I could look at in life that I could say, hey, this could be different, it would be that. Well, they have these Christmas services called Family Christmas that they do a couple weeks before Christmas each year. And they bless families, they bless members of the church, people in the community in incredible ways. And I was in the second service, and I remember my story going up on the big screen in the sanctuary, and they called me up on stage, and they were telling my story and talking about what God had done in my life. And they were telling me, how proud they were of me. And they did two things. They offered me a job at the church. So they gave me employment, which was my first real job outside the internship at the Nehemiah House in recovery. They gave me employment at the church, and they pulled the doors wide open on the side of the sanctuary, and they drove a 2014 Jeep Grand Cherokee into the sanctuary with a big bow on it and gave me this car. I had never owned a car in my life. Any car that I had, my parents had either made payments for it or got for me. And so they just handed me the keys, signed the title over to me, and gave me this vehicle and blessed me in a really big way. And and I can look right outside this this window right here, and there's my Jeep that I still have today that really has been instrumental in a lot of different ways, but tangibly transportation is a huge thing, especially early in recovery. So that's just one story. Being in recovery and following God does not mean that God's going to just bless you with a vehicle. But what it did tell me, what it showed me, was that God's going to meet my needs, and that he's going to be there, and he's going to show me that he's faithful in a lot of different ways. And that's just one way that church, that group of people just really showed me what being generous is like, what, living a life of giving is like. And so this was the environment that I was serving in, that I was going to school in, that I was learning in. And then I learned about something called peer recovery. So I'd continued to stay involved, obviously, with church and with recovery. So to me, they're married. They're the same. I know sometimes they're kind of looked at as these two separate paths, these two separate things. But for me, my recovery and my faith in God are connected, and they work, hand in hand. And so, but I also, I go to recovery meetings, other 12-step meetings and 12-step fellowships, and I get involved. The principles that I learn in these recovery meetings are I can tie them back to the Word of God, and they're just ways for me to live and for me to maintain my recovery, but also build really good relationships with a lot of incredible, amazing people. I never knew how many amazing people, probably so many people that are listening here, watching this, that are in recovery, that have been through the same things that I've been through, and they're living a different life, and they're just so amazing. They're so incredible. And I just got to start building a lot of these relationships. And I met a guy named Jimmy McGill, and he was leading the state. He still does it when it comes to peer support and peer recovery. He was developing this program out in the state of Arkansas. And he was telling me about this idea of peer recovery and how it's, in a nutshell, it's one person that's been through something is walking along someone else that's going through the same thing, and and helping them get connected to recovery and resources. And I was like, hey, that sounds like something I'm interested in. I would love to be a part of that. Not as like a profession necessarily. I was working at the church. I was going to school for ministry, but I was just like, well, this would be some good tools to add to my tool belt. So let me just go through this training. So I went through the training, and I, started learning about peer support. I remember my first idea was how do I implement this in the local church, and that was kind of like my thing that I was trying to figure out. Well, God knew what he was doing. He was preparing me for what he was about to do. So 3 months after that, a local hospital called the University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences posted a job for the emergency department. And a friend sent me a link and said, hey, this job looks like it'd be perfect for you. And I didn't really have a huge interest in doing this as a profession, right? But I said, hey, I gave it a shot, put together a resume, submitted an application. And a couple weeks later, I got the call from the doctor there and called me in for an interview. And went in for the interview and I got hired. And I ended up becoming the first person in the state of Arkansas to be employed as a peer specialist in an emergency department. So I started that job and I was able to lead and implement and develop this peer support program in the emergency department, where within 1 year I had interacted and worked with up to close to 600 people, I think about 591 people. I had the honor and opportunity to get 215 people directly connected to treatment from the hospital and from the emergency department, meaning, everything but walked inside the door with them. We got, getting them directly connected to services, inpatient, outpatient, MAT clinics, recovery meetings, whatever that looked like for that person. Peer support's all about meeting the person right where they're at and just being a hope shot, but also being someone that can help them navigate this complicated system of treatment and recovery, and just kind of walking alongside them in that journey, not in front of them, not behind them, but right beside them. And that's what I did in the emergency department. Someone would come in for an overdose. They would, get revived. They would get, medically stable. And then I would get to come alongside them and introduce myself as someone in recovery, that I've been in where you've been. I've gone through this. I know it sucks. I know it's rough, but I also know that, hey, this can be the foundation that starts the next chapter of your life. This can be something new. This can be the start of something new. And if you're interested in that, hey, let's talk about it. And if you're not, here's my contact information. And I'm here for you in a non-judgmental, equality type way. We're on the same level. And so I would do that. I would just walk alongside people and whatever they wanted to do when it came to treatment and recovery. I'd get them Narcan, take home boxes of nasal spray Narcan. I distributed over 400 doses of Narcan through the emergency department that first year. And I got the honor, God gives me and you the honor to take our past and to turn into purpose in the form of peer support to help other people find and sustain a life of recovery. And I got to do that there at the hospital. And that really just kind of birthed in me a passion for peer support, a passion for recovery services in the state of Arkansas. And so I just kept getting involved. Any opportunity that I got, any chance that I could potentially advance those tools or hone my craft as a peer specialist, I did. And so Arkansas has this really unique 3-tiered training model for peer support, where there's a core, advanced, and supervisor. And I ended up getting to progress through all 3 of those stages and becoming one of the first 10 peer supervisors in the state of Arkansas, where, I can supervise other peers. And I've had the opportunity to lead and develop peer support programs in other hospitals across the state and supervise the peer specialists that work there. It's just like taking my past with addiction and using it for purpose. Now I can take my past experience with peer support in a hospital and use it to help other hospitals and help other peer specialists implement this in their hospital and in their program. And it's just been an amazing journey, an amazing opportunity. I thank God every day that I get to wake up and do these things, because I know for me, recovery at some point along the way, it changed from something that I have to do to something that I get to do. And I think today I get to do this life. I have to do some things to maintain this life, but I get to do them as well. And I'm grateful for that. The most recent development in my life is January of this year. The hospital, there was funding discussions. And so it had me a little uneasy about what my future looked like. And so there was a job opening that came for an organization called NAADAC, the Association for Addiction Professionals. And so, like I mentioned earlier, Arkansas's peer support is 3 levels. And the state of Arkansas was looking to partner with an organization to certify those 3 levels. And they decided to partner with NAADAC. In January of 2021 of this year, they partnered with NAADAC to be the certifying body for all three of those levels in the state of Arkansas. And NAADAC hired me. I got connected to Cynthia Moreno-Tui, the executive director, and got to meet her and get to know her. And she decided to hire me as the peer specialist program manager to oversee and manage that certification process. So I stepped away from the hospital full time. I still work there now, part time. A couple of nights a week, I'll go into the emergency department to provide direct peer services, and they'll hand out my contact information throughout the week for people to call and for me to help get them connected to services. My full-time job today is I work for NAADAC, the Association for Addiction Professionals, and I manage the Arkansas Peer Specialist Program, where I now get to help other peer specialists get connected to the training, go through the entire certification process, help them in their continuing education, the professional development, and get them, to advance their career, to turn their recovery into a career, and advance through the Arkansas model of peer support through the core, advanced, and supervisor levels. And I manage that program. And so anything from beginning the application process to getting signed up for your test, to if there's an ethics complaint when it comes to peer support in the state of Arkansas, we have an Arkansas Peer Ethics Review Committee that we have created and established to review those complaints and to make those decisions. Everything is led and governed by peers, people with lived experience from substance use and or mental health challenges. And it's just an amazing program to be a part of. NAADAC is an incredible organization that has partnered with the state of Arkansas and given peers, people with lived experience, a voice at the table in every decision, every level of the decision-making process. There is literally nothing about people with substance use or mental health disorders. No decisions are made about them in the state of Arkansas without people that have lived experience in recovery at those tables. And this is just another example of that through NAADAC and being able to manage this program. And so that's what I get to do for a job. But, more than anything, recovery has given me a life of purpose. My purpose today is real simple. It's just, to me, God really simplified the gospel for me, where my purpose in life is to love God and love people and to do that to the best of my ability. And if I do that and I do that to the best of my ability every day, God will take all situations, anything that I go through, the storms that I will face in life, regardless if I'm getting high or not. I'm going to face some storms. I'm going to face some hardships. I'm going to have some financial struggles. I'm going to have some relationship issues. I'm going to face loss, grief, death, a pandemic. I'm going to have all these different challenges that I will face. It's guaranteed. It's a promise. But if I will continue to love God and love people to the best of my ability, in the midst of that and in the face of that, God will turn those situations around and he'll use them for good. He'll use them to develop stronger character in me. He'll use them to bring glory to his name. He'll use them to connect me with other people. He'll use them to help other people. And so I just learned that that's my purpose. That's my life, and he lets me do that in a variety of ways. And one of those ways is through recovery and using my story to do that. I have fully restored relationships with my family. My mom, my dad, they actually want me to be around. They will let me go to their home when they're out of town. They'll let me drive their vehicles if I need to. I mean, things that were lost for so long have now been restored and redeemed. I'm a contributing member of my society. I actively give back to my community. I serve in a local church. I get to lead in a local church. I have healthy relationships with friends and family members, and I'm a person of long-term recovery, and I'm also a person that gets to be involved in the recovery community and give back to that community each and every day. And I wake up and I'm not controlled by a substance. I'm not controlled by the desire or the need to get high or to drink. And now I know that I got to continue doing the things that I've been doing to continue to get the results that I've been getting. And that, for me, that's why I know the disease of addiction is a real thing, because I live with it every day. And there are some days where my mind tells me some really dumb things. But I know that those thoughts are not what get me in trouble. I got to take those thoughts and I got to practice the principles of recovery. I got to talk to someone else. I got to go to a meeting. I got to go do something else. And I got to get that thought out of. Thank God today that I don't have to end up with action. That I may have thoughts, but I've been given principles. I've been given ways to deal with those thoughts where they don't turn into actions. And I pray and I hope to continue doing that. And I'm just grateful to be alive today. I'm grateful that I get to attend events like Mobilize Recovery and meet people like JR, who then get me connected to be able to sit here and share my story with you all tonight. I got to say this, that without so many people, hundreds and hundreds of people that have invested important into my life, I would not be sitting here tonight. I would probably be dead, but I certainly would not be where I'm at today in life. So without all those people and without my relationship with God, none of this is possible. And no matter where you're at, no matter what you're going through, what your family members going through, no matter how dark it may seem, 4 years ago on July 10, 2017, my life was a mess and it did not look good. And there's no doctor or person you would have talked to that they would have said this is going to be a good outcome. But I'll tell you this, that no matter what it looks like, there's hope. As long as there's breath in someone's lungs, there's hope, and to not ever give up on them, because recovery is possible. Recovery is hard work, but it's certainly possible. And I'm evidence of that. And I'm just grateful that I have the gift of recovery. And I'm just really grateful that I got to be here tonight and share my story. And I'm going to kick it back to you, Brett, and let you take it from here.
Wow, that was an incredible story, Kyle. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And one of the things that I wanted to touch on that you brought up, it was several minutes ago, but you had talked about, and it's something that I also went through, is identification and our ideas of what an addict is. I think for me, that's part of why I stayed out there using for so long, is I had those misconceptions that an addict is, like before I found recovery, my vision of an addict was, someone that's homeless, someone that uses needles. Like, I had all these ideas in my head, like, panhandling, like all these different things that I thought that's what addiction, or that's what an addict is. And so those misconceptions helped me continue to use, because I would compare my current situations to other people, whether it was an actual person or just like this image that I had in my head of like, well, my life isn't that bad, my addiction isn't that bad. So I think that was a fantastic point that you brought up there. And man, talk about just an incredible story from where you were homeless, shooting heroin, to where you are now, where you get to help and impact so many people, man. Like, that is an absolutely incredible journey. I mean, just in that short period of time, in 4 years, and just to see, how God has used you and continues to use you, man. Like, it's incredible to see that. And man, I love hearing these stories, because it brings hope to me, even though I'm living this recovery journey, even though, JR has allowed me to be on this video and host this and have, amazing guests. Like, it gives me hope too, of like, look at what can happen in our lives. And like you said, as long as we have breath in our lungs, like, we still have that opportunity to live this beautiful life. And man, what somebody said it in the comments, just the beauty and the gift that recovery is, man. It truly is. Like, life is incredible today without drugs, man. Like, I never would have imagined that my life would be what it is now, but it's absolutely incredible. So thank you again, Kyle, for sharing that. And I think we're going to do that book giveaway here before we wrap things up. So like I mentioned earlier, JR has another copy of Victoria's Voice to give away. So we're going to do just like we did last week. We'll do a number between 1 and 25, and whoever guesses that. Oh, Ian's already guessing in the comments. Between 1 and 25, we'll get that copy of the book. And if you are the winner, send a message to the Recovery Revolution page, and JR can get your information. Ian's trying real hard to get that copy of the book. Oh, JR said Ian won last week. LOL. Yeah, because look at his work ethic here, man. As soon as I hadn't even finished talking about it, and he's already punching numbers in. He's in it to win it.
There's Brooke. We got someone else to the game now.
Yeah, now we got some more competition for Ian.
There we go.
Oh,
There's
and
Crystal.
Here we go.
Hey, Crystal.
1 and 25. I accidentally put one of his numbers up there. Didn't mean to leave his number on the screen. Sorry, Ian. That was an accidental click. I'm still new to this, guys. So forgive me. I'm not. Oh, JR, are you trying to win your own book, your own giveaway?
My mom put my number 13. That's my lucky number. That was my basketball number. I know 13 is not lucky, but that's my number.
Oh. They're still coming in. I'm trying to scroll back up and see who was the first one to put it in. All right, there it is. Crystal, number 12.
Hey, Crystal.
All right. So, Crystal, if you'll message to the Recovery Revolution page and link up with JR, and he'll get you your copy of the book. I saw multiple 12s, but I was like, I got to find who said it first because they just kept. It was like I couldn't scroll fast enough.
Crystal's here in Arkansas with us, so congratulations,
awesome.
Crystal. Yeah,
awesome.
I did see a question, Brett, that two people asked. If you don't mind, I'll answer it real quick. It was they're basically asking, where did you find God? Where did you wave the white flag and surrender? And I saw someone ask this earlier question similar to that, and it wasn't a moment. It was a process. I've learned that recovery for me and just the process of finding a relationship with God was very much that. It was a process. And so when I explained that 6 weeks, it was somewhere in that 6 weeks, that 6 weeks led to making that decision to give my life to God and to surrender to the idea that he was going to use this program. But there is one particular moment where God really spoke to me for the first time, not audibly. I've never heard God's voice audibly, but I learned that reading God's word is one of the primary ways that he speaks to me and he speaks to us. And so I was reading in the laundry room at the Nehemiah house, and I came to a verse in Matthew chapter 7, I believe, and it's talking about it's the comparison between a foolish man and a wise man. It's talking about how a fool builds his house on sand, and when the waves and the storms and the winds of life come and they beat on the house, the house falls apart. But then on the other hand, the wise man builds his house on a rock. And so when the waves and the storms and the winds of life come and beat on the house that's built on the rock, it stands firm. It withstands it. And it was something about reading that during that particular point in time where God was showing me that I was a fool, that I'd been a fool. And that if I wanted to be a wise man, that I had to learn to build my house on the rock, and that was going to take some time, and that was going to take a process. And so there was something about that helped me surrender to God. It was something about that helped me to surrender to the idea of being in this long-term program for a significant period of time. And so that was, if I was to look at a moment, that would be one of the highlights that really helped me in that process. But it was more of a process of surrender than it was a moment.
That's good stuff, man. Good stuff. Let's see. Do we have any other questions for Kyle? I'll get with you after on that, JR. It's a complicated answer. JR is asking technical questions. Ian said, any spiritual awakenings in or during recovery?
Yeah, many, early on and continuously throughout the process. Because like I said earlier, this is about, a lifestyle. So these are things that I continue to experience, are ongoing. I can highlight just a couple. For spiritual awakenings, really the Holy Spirit and just the concept of the Holy Spirit and my relationship with him was one of those ones I was like, I don't really understand. But I learned that the Holy Spirit is like essentially like the fuel for me to live my life, whether that be my recovery or my Christian life, that I need the Holy Spirit and I have to have an active, engaged relationship with the Holy Spirit. And so that I have to ask for that every day, to be filled with the Holy Spirit, to be guided by the Holy Spirit, because my decision making and my heart and my own understanding, it typically gets me in bad situations. And so I need the Holy Spirit. I need counsel from other people that are guided by the Holy Spirit. And so that principle is just like a fundamental principle, like a pillar in my life, to be guided by, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding, and in all your ways acknowledge him and he will make your path straight. Like, it was like, okay, like, Kyle, you don't really know what you're doing, and you're not going to know what you're doing. You need to lean on God. You need to lean on his people for advice and counsel and guidance in life. Another one is that, and I wanted to say this before we wrapped up, is that just because I'm not drinking or getting high today doesn't mean I don't make some bad decisions, and that I haven't experienced some hard times, and that, you know, things are not always just great. Like I said earlier, storms in life happen, and sometimes I've experienced they're self-induced storms. I created the storm by poor decision making, and so, but I learned this, that no matter what happens, no matter how low it may seem or how dark it may seem, that going back to using drugs and alcohol is never going to fix or change the problem. It's never going to make it better, certainly never going to make it go away, and it's never going to change. The one thing it could do is kill me. It could kill me, and it could take my life. And that is something that I don't want to happen, but it's always a reality. The reason I say that is because no matter what I face, whether I create it or I don't create it, or if it's just life challenges that happen that we all face, like, I got to continue to stay diligent and stay focused on my recovery, to stay focused on my relationship with God when I feel like it and when I don't feel like it. And I got to just keep doing those simple things that I've learned to do, and to not go back. Like, going back to using or drinking will never be the right answer. Sometimes my mind tells me that it is, right? And that's when I got to take those thoughts and I got to practice recovery with them. But going backwards is never the way to go. It says in Galatians 6:9, it essentially says, just, you know, never give up. Like, you know, it may get challenging. It may get discouraging when you're doing the same things over and over again and you feel like you're not getting any results. But it says, you know, in due time and right time, if we do not give up, we'll reap a harvest. And so that's like a mentality. It's one of the awakenings, the principles that I've really held on to, is that never give up, keep moving forward, keep doing the things that you've learned to do, and do not go backwards to using or drinking.
Good stuff, man. That's a great answer to the question. Do we have any other questions for Kyle before we wrap up? We got another one from Ian. He said, any temptations during your recovery process? And if so, what are your tools in your toolbox to combat them?
Yeah, I mean, all kinds of temptations, you know, I mean, whether the temptation is just most recently, I was driving down the interstate. You know, obviously I hadn't drank or used in over 4 years, and I have this life of recovery and this incredible things that God's given me. But the Budweiser truck and the Bud Light truck drive right past me at the same time. And for whatever reason, at that particular point in time, I immediately started romanticizing and thinking about and obsessing over the idea of drinking. Not really like drinking when it was at a low point in my life, but I was thinking about all the good times in college and how this was fun and just the whole scene back then. And so the temptation there was to have positive associations with drinking or using. And the way that I combat that, the tools that I use was like, I told on myself as soon as I could, just like I'm doing right now. And I mean, the very next time that I was talking to someone, I told them that I had that crazy thought, you know. And I also, if you're in recovery, you probably heard playing the tape through, like, what is the reality of the thought that you're having? So the thought that I was having was immediately connected to a positive memory and a positive association. But when I pause and take captive that thought and really think about what happens if that thought becomes an action, I start realizing that there's way more to the story, and the way more to the story is actually the reality of what happens. Because if I start drinking, if I start using today, you know, it may not happen overnight, but pretty soon or another, I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to lose my vehicle. I'm going to lose my relationships with my family. I'm going to probably end up in jail. I may end up dead. I'll end up back in treatment. I'll end up homeless. All those things will happen. And so I got to like process through that. And oftentimes one of the tools I use, I process through that with someone else out loud. And because when I say it and I talk to someone else about it, it's like, man, that's a terrible idea. And some temptations are to give up. Like, just to give up, like, not like necessarily go get higher drink, but just to, you know, I don't really want to do this anymore. You know, like some days it's just like, I don't feel like this is working. I'm not getting the benefits. I'm not as on fire as I once was. Like, it doesn't feel as good. It's, you know, all these different, you know, thoughts and insecurities that I'll have going back and forth in my head. And so there's that temptation well, just keep doing life, and you'll be all right. You'll be able to keep getting the results without putting in the work. And the tools for that, again, is I'll talk about that out loud, but then also I'll like make myself go do those things. And a lot of times I feel like I'll wait. Like we'll want to wait for the feeling to come before we do something. But I've also learned that maybe if you just start doing it, that the momentum and the process of doing it actually can bring about the feeling of encouragement and the feeling of motivation that you're looking for. So instead of waiting on the feeling to be right, I'll just start doing it, and the feeling may come afterwards, or it may not. But I do know this, that I'll get the result that I'm looking for if I do the things that I've been doing.
Good stuff, man. And I like JR added on to that. I think we romanticize about our past and forget the pain, chaos, destruction, misery.
Absolutely.
JR also asked, any alternate programs outside of AA/NA?
Yeah, well, AA, NA, Celebrate Recovery, all of those are really in the same ballpark. They're all 12-step programs. And, outside of that, there are many different pathways to recovery that I do support and support other people finding. Like there's, the medication assisted treatment that I believe works. Medication can be used, and then recovery coupled with that, and it can be really effective for opioid use disorder. There's smart recovery, and I haven't practiced a lot of that myself, but for me, just some of the basic principles that you can pull from all these different programs are community, people that are like-minded, not going through things in isolation, being open and honest with one another are some of the main things that you can pull from them all. And just having a group of people that you can walk through life with is oftentimes a huge thing. But I also play golf now. I'm outdoors and I go hiking, and I try to enjoy life. And for me, that's just as much a part of my recovery as anything else, because when I stopped drinking and getting high, life didn't stop. I didn't stop wanting to have fun in life. So, being active and getting those natural chemicals that make us feel good that our body produces on its own, just getting them going on a day-to-day basis, and can be really rewarding and can be really fulfilling too. And I also believe that can be a form of recovery.
Great answers. I'm not seeing any other questions coming in. JR is putting some other alternatives there in the comments.
I skydiving. I went skydiving for the first time about a couple months ago. That was a fun experience.
Ironically, I also went skydiving pretty early on in my recovery.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it is a blast.
Yeah, I think I had like 6 months clean or something, and I ended up going skydiving.
Nice.
Yeah, I think there's something to that though. Like when you first get clean, it's like you have to find some kind of like adrenaline rush or something because you're so used to that chaotic lifestyle and just like doing crazy stuff. I think
Yeah.
I think now I've settled down. Like I've gotten a little older. I'm married. I have a kid. Like I'm I'm like the lame old guy that doesn't ever want to leave the house. But like early in my recovery, it was like, wanting to do skydiving, and I picked up mountain biking and like doing all kinds of different crazy stuff.
Yeah. Looking for the thrill.
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, I'm not seeing any more questions coming in, but I would like to say, Kyle, thank you again for coming on tonight, man, and just sharing your story with us, man. It was absolutely incredible, and just the journey that you've been on in the last 4 years. That's absolutely incredible, and just a testimony to what can happen when we finally do surrender and start working a recovery program, and just the potential that every one of us has. There's no limit to what God can do with us once we get clean. And man, it's absolutely incredible to hear your story. Um, it's amazing, man. So thank you again for coming on here and sharing with us. And as a reminder, guys, we do have an audio only version of the live streams. If you're looking for that, You can search Recovery Revolution Live on your favorite podcast players. There's also now a podcast tab on our Facebook page, so you can listen to it directly from Facebook if you don't like to look at us, which is understandable. I don't enjoy watching myself on video, so I get it. And I also have another podcast called Recovery Survey. I release an episode every Wednesday. They're a little smaller, usually about 30-minute segments. This upcoming week, I have a guest on that's going to be talking about eating disorders and anorexia. So if that's something that you struggle with, I would definitely recommend checking that out. You can find that anywhere you get podcasts. I don't think I have any other announcements. I almost went into like my default mode of like doing announcements at the end of a meeting, like open servants positions and
Yeah.
come to our business meeting.
We got upcoming events coming up.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really grateful for you, Brett, for JR, and just the Recovery Revolution page, the podcast, the live streams, everything that you're doing. And I'm so thankful for the opportunity to share my recovery, my story. And I hope, my prayer is that it gives other people hope, encouragement, it breaks stigma, because that's what we're all here to do, is to just take our past and use it to help other people. So I'm grateful for the opportunity, and I've enjoyed spending some time with you tonight.
Yeah, and I'll echo that too. Thank you, JR, because without him, this page wouldn't exist, and we wouldn't have this awesome platform with a group full of other recovering addicts that are here to listen to us talk. So, JR, thank you for being who you are and the incredible person you are and creating this group. I know it's helping a lot of people, so thank you for that. All right, guys, we'll be back next week at the same time, 7 p.m. Central, with another fantastic guest. So please be sure to come back to the Facebook page, and I'm sure that we'll have some teasers and stuff coming up on the page, letting you know about who next week's guest is. Until next time, I'm Brett. I need to work on a sign off because that's very unnatural.
Well, thank you, Brett. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everybody.